The brightest lights in Hollywood couldn't illuminate the shadow that had fallen across one of America's most beloved actors that night. The studio audience was buzzing with their usual pre-show excitement, completely unaware they were about to witness something that would leave them speechless and questioning everything they thought they knew about celebrity culture and global influence. Denzel Washington, the man who had commanded respect on every stage and screen for decades, sat in that familiar guest chair looking like a stranger to himself. Where was the magnetic charm that had captivated millions? Where was that signature smile that could light up a room? Instead, viewers at home and audience members alike watched as one of Hollywood's most articulate voices seemed to retreat into an almost uncomfortable silence. The host tried their best to draw him out with the usual banter, but something was clearly weighing heavily on Denzel's mind. His responses were short, distant, almost mechanical. The man who had played kings and heroes on screen appeared to be grappling with something far more profound than any role he'd ever taken on. The interview was struggling to find its rhythm when suddenly the impossible happened. A production assistant rushed onto the set, whispered urgently into the host's ear, and within seconds, the entire energy of the studio shifted. The host, clearly flustered and trying to maintain composure, announced that there was an urgent international call that needed to be taken live on air. The confusion was palpable. Audience members exchanged bewildered glances. Camera operators adjusted their positions, unsure of what they were about to capture. Even the seasoned production crew, who had seen everything in their years of live television, stood frozen in anticipation. Then came the voice that would change everything. Clear, respectful, and carrying the weight of a nation's leadership, President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso addressed Denzel Washington directly, his words cutting through the studio's confusion like a beacon of clarity. The young president's message was simple yet profound. He wanted to thank the man who had unknowingly shaped his childhood, who had shown a young African boy that dignity, strength, and leadership could be embodied in ways that transcended borders and circumstances. As President Traore spoke about watching Denzel's films as a child in Burkina Faso, about how those performances had planted seeds of possibility in his young mind, the studio fell into a silence so complete that you could hear the gentle hum of the cameras capturing this unprecedented moment. Here was a sitting president, a leader who had risen to power through conviction and courage, crediting a Hollywood actor with helping to shape his vision of what leadership could look like. What happened next will stay with everyone in that studio for the rest of their lives. As President Traoré's words continued to flow through the speakers, something profound began to shift in Denzel Washington. The man who had spent decades mastering the art of emotional control, who could summon tears or strength on command for any role, found himself completely vulnerable in a way that no script had ever demanded. His hands, those same hands that had delivered countless powerful performances, began to tremble almost imperceptibly at first, then more visibly as the weight of the president's message settled into his soul. The camera captured every micro-expression as Denzel's carefully maintained composure began to crack. His breathing became deeper, more deliberate, as if he was trying to steady himself against an emotional tide he hadn't seen coming. When President Traoré spoke about courage, about how watching Denzel portray men of principle had taught him that true leadership meant standing for justice even when the world seemed against you, something fundamental shifted in the actor's eyes. These weren't just compliments from a fan. These were the words of a man who had translated inspiration into real-world action, who had taken the seeds of possibility he'd seen on screen and grown them into a revolution of hope for his people. The silence stretched between continents as Denzel struggled to find his voice. His eyes, those expressive windows that had conveyed the depths of human experience in countless films, now reflected something raw and unguarded. The first tear appeared so quietly that viewers had to look twice to be sure they'd seen it. Then another, and another. This wasn't the controlled crying of a performance. This was the pure, unfiltered response of a man confronting the true impact of his life's work in a way he never could have imagined. When President Traore extended his invitation to visit Burkina Faso, his voice carried the warmth of genuine respect and gratitude. But it was his next words that completely undid Denzel Washington. The president spoke of his dream to establish a leadership academy for young Africans, a place where the next generation could learn not just about governance and policy, but about the kind of moral courage and unwavering principles that Denzel had embodied in his most powerful roles. And he wanted to name it after the man who had unknowingly mentored him from thousands of miles away, through the magic of cinema and the power of authentic storytelling. The studio had become a sanctuary of silence, every person present understanding they were witnessing something sacred. Denzel's shoulders, which had carried the weight of so many characters' struggles, now shook with the profound realization that his work had transcended entertainment and had become a catalyst for real change in the world. The tears flowed freely now, and there was no shame in them, only the pure recognition of a life's purpose fulfilled in ways he had never dared to dream. What followed next revealed the true measure of the man behind the legend. While most celebrities would have turned such a moment into a media spectacle, complete with press releases and carefully orchestrated photo opportunities, Denzel Washington made a choice that spoke to the very core of who he truly was. He quietly booked a flight to Burkina Faso. No entourage, no publicity team, no red carpet welcome. Just a man with a single carry-on bag, boarding a plane like any other passenger, carrying nothing but respect and curiosity in his heart. The journey took him from the glittering boulevards of Hollywood to the dust-swept streets of Ouagadougou, from a world where his name appeared on marquees to a place where people knew him simply as the man their president admired. This wasn't a celebrity appearance or a charitable photo op. This was something far more profound. It was a pilgrimage of gratitude, a quiet acknowledgement that the most meaningful connections often happen far from the spotlight. But the real story began when President Traore introduced Denzel to the woman who had shaped not just his own life, but indirectly the destiny of an entire nation. Mama Hawa lived in a modest home with earthen walls and a corrugated metal roof, where the luxury was not in the furnishings but in the warmth that radiated from every corner. She was a woman whose hands told the story of decades spent nurturing, building, and believing in the impossible dream that a young boy from her care could one day lead his people toward a better future. When Denzel first met Mama Hawa, something extraordinary happened in that simple room. Here was a woman who had never walked a red carpet or attended a movie premiere, yet she possessed a dignity and strength that commanded the same respect he had shown to heads of state and fellow actors. Her eyes held the wisdom of someone who had witnessed struggle and triumph in equal measure, who had poured her life into raising children who weren't biologically hers simply because love recognizes no boundaries. As Mama Hawa shared stories of young Ibrahim, her voice carried the pride of a mother recounting her son's journey from a curious, determined boy to the leader he had become. She spoke of how he would watch Denzel's films on an old television, how he would stand a little straighter after seeing portrayals of men who fought for justice, how he would practice speeches inspired by the dignity and conviction he witnessed on screen. Through her gentle words, Denzel began to understand that his influence had traveled through invisible threads of inspiration, landing in the heart of a child who would grow up to change the course of history for his people. In that humble room, surrounded by the simple treasures of a life lived in service to others, something shifted in the very foundation of what this story meant. This was no longer about a Hollywood star receiving recognition from a world leader. This had become something infinitely more precious, a testament to the power of human connection, to the way authentic storytelling can cross oceans and decades to plant seeds of possibility in the most unexpected places. Sitting with Mama Hawa, Denzel understood that he was witnessing the true magic of his life's work, not in the awards or accolades, but in the quiet transformation of a young boy who had been raised to believe that greatness was not just possible, but inevitable. What happened in the quiet corners of the presidential palace revealed even more layers to this extraordinary story. President Traore led Denzel into a private room that served as both archive and shrine, where weathered journals and faded photographs told the intimate story of a nation's journey toward hope. There, among handwritten letters and childhood drawings, Denzel discovered something that would move him to his core: pages upon pages of young Ibrahim's thoughts and dreams, many of them directly inspired by the films and characters that had shaped his understanding of leadership and justice. The president had kept everything, every scrap of paper that documented his evolution from dreamer to leader, and threaded throughout were references to the man who now stood reading them with tears in his eyes. But it was President Traore's next decision that transformed this private moment of discovery into something that would touch an entire nation. He announced that Mama Hawa, the woman who had nurtured not just him but countless other children, deserved recognition that went far beyond the walls of her modest home. A ceremony would be held at the village school where she had volunteered for decades, and the entire community would gather to honor Th. When Mama Hawa was presented with a Medal of Honor by President Traore, her tears mixed with those of everyone present. But it was her speech, delivered in her native language and translated for Denzel, that revealed the true depth of her character. She spoke not of her own achievements, but of her gratitude for having been trusted with the care of so many young souls, and her amazement that one of those souls had grown up to lead with such wisdom and compassion. The story could have ended there, a beautiful chapter closed in the red dust of Burkina Faso. But Denzel Washington understood that something this powerful needed to be shared with the world. Upon his return to the United States, he arranged for something unprecedented: a live television reunion that would connect three hearts across two continents. The call was scheduled during prime time, with cameras rolling as Denzel, now back in a familiar studio setting, spoke simultaneously with President Traore in his office and Mama Hawa in her village home. What unfolded in those precious minutes became the kind of television that reminds us why the medium was invented in the first place. The genuine love and respect flowing between these three remarkable people created an emotional current that reached through screens and touched millions of viewers around the globe. When President Traore spoke of his ongoing gratitude and Mama Hawa blessed them both in her gentle voice, social media exploded with shares, comments, and tears from people who had been moved by witnessing such authentic human connection. Within hours, clips from the reunion had gone viral across every platform, translated into dozens of languages, and shared by people who understood they were witnessing something rare and beautiful, a moment when the artificial barriers of fame, distance, and difference dissolved completely, leaving only the pure truth of how we can impact each other's lives in ways we may never fully comprehend. The hashtag that emerged organically from viewers around the world said it all: #HumanConnection. This wasn't just entertainment, it was a reminder of the invisible threads that bind us all together, and the miraculous ways that love and inspiration can travel across any distance to change the world. But life, in all its profound beauty and inevitable sorrow, had one final chapter to write in this extraordinary story. 3 months after that magical reunion touched hearts around the globe, Mama Hawa's gentle spirit began its journey toward eternal rest. Age and a lifetime of selfless service had finally caught up with the woman whose love had shaped a president and inspired millions. Yet even in her final days, surrounded by the many children she had raised and the community she had served, Mama Hawa's thoughts were not of herself but of the future she would leave behind. Her last request was as humble and powerful as the woman herself. She asked only that the small schoolyard where she had taught countless children to read would continue to echo with the laughter and dreams of young voices. She wanted no monument to her name, no grand gestures of remembrance. Instead, she whispered her hope that every child who entered that school would know they were capable of changing the world, just as young Ibrahim had proven. Her final words, shared later by President Traore through tears that honored her memory, were simple yet profound: love them all. Believe in them all. The future belongs to them all. When news of Mama Hawa's passing reached President Traore, the nation entered a period of mourning that transcended typical expressions of grief. This was not the formal, distant sorrow reserved for political figures, but the deep, personal loss felt by a country that had come to understand they were saying goodbye to the mother of their beloved leader. Schools closed not by government decree, but by spontaneous community decision. Children gathered in circles to share stories their parents had told them about the gentle teacher who had shaped their president's heart. The funeral became a testament to a life lived in service to others. Thousands gathered in the village where Mama Hawa had spent her final years, creating a sea of colorful traditional dress that painted the landscape with the vibrancy of the lives she had touched. President Traore delivered a eulogy that was both personal tribute and national promise, his voice breaking as he spoke of the woman who had taught him that true leadership begins with love and is sustained by hope. But it was Denzel Washington's presence, having flown back to Burkina Faso to pay his respects, that showed the world how deeply this story had affected everyone it touched. Standing before that gathered multitude, with cameras capturing every moment for a world that had fallen in love with this remarkable woman, Denzel and President Traore made promises that would honor Mama Hawa's legacy in ways she never could have imagined. The leadership academy that would bear her name would be built in her village, ensuring that her spirit of nurturing future leaders would continue for generations. But more than buildings and programs, they committed to carrying forward her fundamental belief that every child, regardless of their circumstances, possessed the potential to change the world. What began as a surprising moment on a late-night talk show had become something far greater than anyone could have anticipated. This wasn't just a story about a Hollywood actor meeting a world leader, or even about the woman who had raised them both in different ways. This had become a universal testament to the power of love to transcend every boundary, to the way authentic inspiration can travel across oceans and decades to plant seeds that grow into forests of hope. In a world often divided by differences that seem insurmountable, the story of Denzel, President Traore, and Mama Hawa reminds us of the fundamental truth that connects every human heart. We are all capable of touching lives in ways we may never fully understand, and those touches ripple outward in patterns of influence that can literally change the course of history. Every teacher who believes in a struggling student, every parent who tells their child they can achieve anything, every person who chooses to lead with love rather than fear, is continuing the legacy that Mama Hawa embodied and that this extraordinary story represents. As you watch this tale unfold, remember that you too are part of this chain of inspiration. Somewhere, someone is watching your example, drawing strength from your courage, finding hope in your determination to make the world a little better than you found it. The question isn't whether you have influence. The question is what you'll do with the influence you already possess. Share this story, not because it's entertainment, but because it's a reminder that love, leadership, and hope are not just beautiful ideals, but practical tools for building the future our children deserve. In honoring Mama Hawa's memory, we honor the potential within every human heart to be the inspiration someone else needs to change the world.